Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something heavier than your weighted blanket, and somehow even sadder than your 2008 Facebook memories. The dark reality of being a war widow in 1940s America. Not the glamorous Rosie the Riveter poster version. Not the vintage Hollywood montage where someone stares wistfully out a window while violins play. No, we're talking about the real thing. The gritty, lonely, tax form-filled, sleep-deprived aftermath of losing the person you built your whole life around while still trying to keep the lights on, the kids fed, and your sanity intact. So before we wander any deeper into this emotional minefield, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this brand of sleepy historical heartbreak sprinkled with mild sarcasm. And thank you for suggesting this topic. You all have a talent for choosing stories that hit straight in the feelings. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is too. For some reason, the phrase "it's 2:14 a.m. and I'm folding laundry" just resonates on a spiritual level with this channel. Now go ahead and dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soothing background hum, and get cozy. Preferably in a bed that does not contain ration-era wool blankets, because those things felt like sleeping under sandpaper. Let's sit with a few questions for a moment. What did it really feel like to wait for letters that might never come? How did you explain war to a 4-year-old who thinks daddy's just on a really long adventure? How many casseroles can one grieving person pretend to enjoy before losing their mind? Did ration coupons judge you if you bought too much sugar? Did every knock at the door feel like your entire world about to collapse? Was grief quieter back then? Or was everyone just better at pretending? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1943. Your coffee's rationed, your paycheck is half what it should be, and your heart is carrying a weight nobody teaches you how to lift. Good luck and let's begin. You're standing in your kitchen, halfway through making terrible wartime coffee, when you see him, the telegram boy, walking up the path. Nobody ever sent good news by telegram. The world slows down, sound disappears, and suddenly even the ticking clock feels cruel. That thin yellow slip of paper weighs more than your entire life. He hesitates at your gate, as if the universe has given him a moment to reconsider. You can't blame him. No 17-year-old wants to be the messenger of heartbreak, especially when he's delivered 3 already this week. His bicycle is still wobbling on the sidewalk, half fallen, as if even it can't bear the weight of what's about to happen. Your hands are still wrapped around the warm mug, and for a moment you cling to the small comfort of bad coffee. The smell is burnt and vaguely metallic, but it's familiar, a steady anchor while the world starts tilting. You try to convince yourself he must be lost. Maybe he's looking for the family down the street. Maybe there's a clerical error. Maybe anything. But no, telegram boys never get lost. He finally lifts his eyes to yours, and that's when you know, before he speaks, before he hands it over, before your fingers even touch the paper, loss announces itself long before it arrives. He clears his throat and recites the words he's been taught to say, "I'm sorry, ma'am." And that's it. That's the entire ceremony. No brass band, no priest, no counselling pamphlet. Just a boy, a bicycle, and your entire future condensed into one sentence of bureaucratic sorrow. You take the paper, though your hands feel strangely disconnected, as if they belong to someone else. The envelope crackles. It's too light. News this heavy shouldn't weigh so little. You place the mug down carefully, deliberately, because you suddenly feel like if you break even one more thing today, you'll break two. You unfold the telegram slowly, like peeling back a bandage you already know is hiding something terrible. The words are clinical, efficient, the kind of thing typed by someone who has never heard your laugh or seen the way he looked at you across a crowded room. We regret to inform you regret feels like too small a word. Inform feels too cold. The United States Army has many talents, but gentleness is not one of them. You reread the lines again because your mind refuses to accept them the first time. Your eyes slide over the details, location, date, the phrase in service to his country, but those aren't the parts that stick. The only words that matter are the ones that mean he isn't coming home. You sink into the nearest chair, though you don't remember deciding to sit. The kitchen looks exactly the same as it did 5 minutes ago. The chipped enamel stove, the apron hanging crookedly on its hook, the loaf of yesterday's bread cooling on the counter. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has. Even the sunlight seems wrong, too warm, too golden for a moment that feels so cold. Somewhere in the distance a dog barks, a car rattles past. Life insists on continuing, which feels rude. The telegram boy shifts awkwardly, unsure whether to leave or stay. You spare him the agony and nod. He retreats with visible relief, hopping on his bicycle and pedalling away fast, as if distance might scrub this memory from his conscience. You close the door and lean your forehead against it, breathing in the scent of wood and dust. You wonder how many women have done this exact thing, this quiet collapse in a doorway, while the world outside strolls past unbothered. Thousands? Tens of thousands? You return to the kitchen table and smooth out the telegram again, as if making the paper flat might make the news more manageable. It doesn't, but the ritual helps. Even a terrible moment feels steadier with something to do with your hands. The coffee on the counter is cold now. You take a sip anyway, because what else is there to do? The bitterness anchors you, reminds you that you're still here, still breathing, even when everything else inside you feels lost. And in that moment, with the telegram lying heavy on your lap, you understand something you never wanted to understand. Grief doesn't arrive with screaming or thunder or melodrama. It arrives quietly. It knocks politely, and then it sits with you in your kitchen while the world keeps moving on. Your bed has never been this large or this cold. You lie there listening to the silence, no boots hitting the floor, no soft snoring, no gentle shifting of blankets. Just you, the dark and the kind of loneliness that settles into your bones like winter wind. You pull the quilt tighter around your shoulders, but fabric can't fill the space he used to take up. You never realized how much heat one person could radiate until the bed turned into a poorly insulated glacier. You shift slightly, hoping to accidentally stumble upon some warmth, but the sheet feels like it was personally trained by the Arctic. You try to breathe slowly, the way your mother taught you, as if that might settle the restless ache building in your chest. But all it does is remind you that you're the only one breathing in the room, the only heartbeat, the only presence. Silence is supposed to be peaceful, but tonight it feels like an intruder. Your mind drifts to the little habits he had, the way he always claimed he didn't kick in his sleep while absolutely kicking in his sleep, the way he stole blankets with the strategic skill of a military operation, how he warmed his icy feet on your shins with the confidence of a man who knew you'd never actually push him out of bed. All the tiny annoyances that once made you roll your eyes now feel like luxuries you'd bargain with heaven to have back. You stare at the ceiling because there's nowhere else to look. Wartime ceilings aren't very interesting, just plaster with hairline cracks that resemble maps of countries you used to pretend you might visit someday. The kind of places he joked you go together when all this was over. But those plans feel like they belong to an entirely different lifetime. Outside, the world is still awake. A distant train horn moans through the night, soft, low, almost mournful. You imagine it travelling through sleepy towns, past farmhouses and factories where other women sit awake, also staring at ceilings, also listening to the hollow pocket of space where someone used to lie. It's comforting, in a sad way, to know you're not alone in your aloneness. Every creak of the house makes you jump. You'd gotten used to waking to the sound of his footsteps or the clink of his belt buckle as he got ready for early shifts. But now the house feels strange, like it's adjusting too, learning its new weight distribution, its new emptiness. You try lying on his side of the bed, thinking maybe it'll feel closer, safer. But the pillow is cold, untouched, stubbornly refusing to hold the shape of his head the way it used to. You inhale, hoping for some lingering trace of him, aftershave, soap, a hint of tobacco, but rationing has taken even sense away from you. Everything smells like laundry soap and defeat. Your thoughts spiral, because nighttime is when your imagination becomes an Olympic-level athlete. You start wondering what he was thinking the last night he slept in a real bed. Did he know it would be his last time sinking into freshly washed sheets? Did he roll over and think about home? Or was he too exhausted, too cold, too burdened to dream at all? These questions don't have answers, but your mind asks them anyway, like a child repeating the same impossible riddle. At some point, a wave of exhaustion hits. Not the soft, gentle kind that ushers you into sleep, the heavy, grief-soaked kind that makes your entire body feel weighted. You close your eyes, they burn, your throat tightens, the dark is enormous. You turn onto your side and tuck your knees in, instinctively assuming the shape of someone bracing against a storm. You curl toward the empty space beside you, as if your body is still convinced he's just out late, or working overtime, or quietly slipping into bed a few minutes behind you. But he's not, and the bed knows it, and so do you. Still, as the minutes drag by and your breath finally evens out, a strange sort of warmth arrives. Not comfort, not acceptance, just a reminder that grief, like sleep, comes in waves. And even on the coldest nights, your heart keeps beating, stubborn and soft, waiting for morning. Your child keeps asking when Daddy's coming home. You're holding a dish towel, pretending to dry a plate that's already dry because giving your hand something to do is easier than finding the right words. How do you tell a child that the world can take things it has no right to? Your child tugs at your sleeve again. Small fingers sticky with something that probably should have been wiped up earlier. They look up at you with eyes that are too big for this conversation. Trusting eyes, expecting a real answer. Because you've never lied before. Not about anything important. You swallow hard, noticing how the afternoon light lands in soft stripes across the kitchen table. It makes everything look gentler than it feels. You set the plate down quietly, buying yourself 4 more seconds of thinking time. 4 seconds to figure out how to explain death without unravelling in front of a toddler who just wants to know why Daddy didn't send a postcard this week. You crouch down, because this kind of truth should really be delivered eye level. Your knees pop, loudly, because grief has apparently aged your joints 5 years overnight. Your child waits, patient in that fidgety way kids are patient, shifting their weight from one foot to the other. He's not coming home. You start softly, each word feeling like it's scraping your throat as it leaves. This is the sentence you've been avoiding, sidestepping, burying under chores and ration books and laundry that smells faintly like worn-out hope. Saying it out loud feels like reopening the telegram all over again. Your child stares, processing. Children don't understand abstractions. They understand routines. Daddy tucked them in. Daddy read the same 3 bedtime stories until his voice cracked. Daddy fixed the loose hinge on the back door after promising to do it for months. So your child asks the only follow-up that makes sense to them. Why? Why? A single syllable that adults spend lifetimes failing to answer. You inhale slowly and gently pull them close. The head fits under your chin perfectly, like it was designed to. Daddy got hurt very far away, you say. The kind of hurt people don't come back from. It's not medically accurate, but it's honest enough and kind enough, and those are the only 2 categories you can manage today. Your child's breath hitches a little. Not quite a sob, just confusion collapsing into fear. But he promised, they whisper, and there it is. the thing that breaks you. Because he did promise. He promised he'd come home, promised he'd teach them to ride a bike, promised he'd paint the bathroom that weird shade of blue you regret choosing, but keep anyway, because it makes the house feel lived in. You think of all the promises people make when they believe there will be enough tomorrows. You rock them gently, the way he used to. It's a rhythm your body remembers even when your heart doesn't. You tell them it's okay to cry. You tell them you're sad too. You tell them you're going to get through this together, even though you're not totally sure how yet. But saying it out loud makes the idea feel a little less impossible. Eventually their tears slow, replaced by hiccups and the occasional sniffle. You carry them to the living room, settling onto the worn couch that sags in all the familiar places. You wrap a blanket around both of you, one of the ones he liked, the soft wool one that somehow survived the laundry's war on fabrics. Your child curls against you, exhausted from the emotional gymnastics of the afternoon. You stroke their hair slowly. Children can fall asleep anywhere, on trains, on shoulders, in laps still damp with tears. The trust in that is enormous. As their breathing evens out, you stare at the quiet room and wonder if any parent in history has ever felt prepared for this. Probably not. Parents in every wartime generation have sat exactly where you're sitting, holding exactly what you're holding, a child and a truth too heavy for their small world. And yet they survived it, and somehow, so will you. Because even when you don't know the right words, even when the world feels impossibly cruel, your child still reaches for you, still trusts you, still believes that if you're here, they'll be okay. And for tonight, that belief is enough to keep breathing, enough to keep going, enough to face tomorrow. Together, every neighbour suddenly has a casserole and an opinion. They mean well, sort of. But you can't take one more sympathetic head tilt or the phrase he's in a better place when you know the better place would have been right here at the dinner table. The first casserole arrives within hours of the telegram. It's tuna, of course. Wartime has turned tuna into the national symbol of polite grief. You thank Mrs. Feldman at the door, even though she's already peering over your shoulder like she expects to see sorrow physically dripping off your furniture. She presses the dish into your hands with a grip that says, "I'm trying to be helpful," and a face that says, "But I'm also taking notes for gossip later." Then comes the second casserole, and the third. It's like the whole neighbourhood held an emergency meeting and unanimously agreed the best way to fix a shattered heart was through an unending supply of lukewarm starch. At this point, your icebox is basically the culinary embodiment of condolences. With each knock at the door, you brace yourself. Someone will shuffle in with a sad smile, speak in a whisper like they're in a funeral home instead of your kitchen, and deliver their carefully prepared script of sympathy. You nod because that's what people do. You say thank you because that's what's polite. But your face hurts from manners, and your soul feels like it has rug burn. Then there are the unsolicited opinions. Everyone suddenly becomes an expert on grief, war, and your personal healing timeline. He's watching over you now. You're strong. You'll bounce back. At least he died a hero. At least he didn't suffer. The at least phrases hit the hardest, like everyone is desperately trying to negotiate your pain down to a more comfortable size. And then someone inevitably says, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, which makes you wonder if God and your neighbours have drastically overestimated you. You close the door after each visitor and exhale the kind of deep, exhausted breath normally reserved for people who've narrowly escaped a burning building. You lean your forehead against the wood for a moment, gathering energy for the next casserole-based assault. Still, you can't fully resent them. This is how people in the 1940s deal with heartbreak. They bake, they bustle, they hover. It's their way of trying to shoulder a piece of the unbearable. And even though their efforts feel clumsy and too loud against your quiet grief, you know their hearts are in the right place. somewhere underneath all that powdered soup mix and egg noodles. The most challenging part is running into people outside your home. The grocery store becomes an emotional minefield. You reach for a can of peas and suddenly hear, "Oh, honey, how are you?" in a tone that implies you might collapse at the slightest breeze. You swallow the urge to say, "Well, I was fine until you reminded me I'm a tragic figure in this week's neighbourhood narrative." At church, it's worse. You can feel eyes on you from every pew, curious, pitying, reverent. You're not just a parishioner anymore, you're a cautionary tale. Even the pastor pulls you aside, offering verses about comfort and endurance, as if scripture might magically substitute for the man who used to sit beside you. You try maintaining normalcy, but grief has turned you into a local celebrity, the kind nobody wants to be. Every invitation to dinner is laced with worried glances. Every casual chat with neighbours drifts inevitably back to him, as if your personality has been temporarily replaced by the words "war widow." And the hardest moments aren't the loud ones, they're the quiet ones. The neighbours head home, the casserole dishes stack up, and you're left scraping tuna from a pan that smells like sorrow and condensed soup. The house settles into silence again, the kind that presses against your ribs. And yet, somewhere in the flurry of awkward kindness, you catch glimpses of real care. A neighbour who fixes your fence without asking, a woman who drops groceries off without ringing the bell, a child who leaves wildflowers on your porch. The pity parade may be overwhelming, but beneath it is something steadier, softer, a community trying in the only way it knows how to remind you that you're not walking through this alone. Not really. Not ever. You're trying to figure out how to stretch sugar rations, shoe stamps, and emotional stability all in the same week. Grief has no respect for your schedule, but dinner still needs to happen somehow. You stare at the ration book on the kitchen table as if it might suddenly develop the ability to help you make decisions. It doesn't, of course, it just lies there, judging you in its quiet, bureaucratic way. Every page is a reminder that even in your personal apocalypse, Washington still expect you to run a household like a well-oiled machine. Sugar, limited. Coffee, laughably limited. Meat, if you squint hard enough, maybe it counts. Emotional resilience, currently unavailable. Please check back later. You flip through the coupons, trying to remember which ones you already used, which ones you meant to use, and which ones you accidentally handed to your child thinking they were fun stickers. Meanwhile, the grocery list beside you is a chaotic mountain of needs and hopes, everything from butter to sleep. Neither are likely to appear. You tie on your coat, the one that's a little too thin for March, and head toward the market. The walk helps you think, though your thoughts mostly revolve around questions like, why does grief make everything heavier? And did I really used to complain about grocery shopping when my biggest concern was whether he'd like Thursday's dinner? The store is crowded, it always is, full of housewives performing their daily ballet of substitutions. No butter, maybe margarine. No meat, beans again. No coffee. Well, that's just cruel. You stand in front of the shelves, clutching your ration book like a lifeline. The clerk gives you a sympathetic nod, the kind that says he knows. Maybe he really does. Nearly everyone knows someone who got a telegram. War has turned your small town into a living ledger of loss. You make your selections slowly, carefully, calculating recipes in your head while also trying not to cry into the flour bin. You're fine, completely fine. Just a normal woman choosing normal produce while her heart quietly tries to crawl under a shelf and hide. At the checkout, the clerk asks how you've been holding up. You give the standard answer, "Oh, you know, taking it day by day," the socially acceptable translation of "I'm one shoe stamp away from losing my mind." He tells you to call if you ever need extra help carrying groceries home. You appreciate the offer, though you suspect what you really need help carrying isn't in the bag. Back home, you place everything on the counter and take a deep breath. The house is too quiet again, and your thoughts bounce around like loose change in an empty drawer. You begin chopping vegetables, measuring out flour, rationing sugar with the precision of a chemist. Wartime recipes are basically culinary math problems. Boil this, stretch that, pray over the result. You stir a pot of soup and wonder if the steam rising from it counts as aromatherapy. It smells like onions, exhaustion, and the faintest whisper of determination. Not exactly delicious, but comforting in a we're doing our best kind of way. Your child wanders in, asking what's for dinner. You answer automatically, grateful for the small distraction. Cooking becomes a kind of meditation, repetitive motions that keep your hands busy so your brain doesn't spiral too far. Peel, chop, stir, breathe. By the time you set the table, you feel a tiny bit steadier. Not healed, not even close, but upright. And upright is enough to get through dinner. You sit down with your child and watch them eat, appreciating the way kids can turn even the blandest wartime meal into an event. They chatter about school, about neighbours, about a frog they saw, a life still full of small miracles. It grounds you. After dinner, when the dishes are washed and the kitchen is quiet again, you return to the ration book. You smooth the cover gently, almost affectionately. This little book isn't just coupons, it's structure. It's the daily reminder that life goes on in measurable, manageable pieces, and as strange as it feels, rationing grief works the same way. A little bit at a time. Manage what you can. Don't let the whole week hit you at once. Tomorrow will bring another list, another recipe, another round of figuring things out. But tonight, you survived dinner. And in this new life, that counts as victory. Light bulbs go out, pipes rattle, the back gate won't close, and every small inconvenience feels like the universe reminding you that you're now the one responsible for everything. There's no one to hand things off to, no one to say, "I'll fix it this weekend." You never realised how many tiny household problems he quietly handled until they all seemed to break at once, like the house itself is testing your emotional warranty. You stand in the hallway staring at the flickering light bulb, half expecting him to appear with a ladder and that overly confident grin he always wore when attempting home repairs. But it's just you, the bulb, and a chair you're not entirely sure is sturdy enough to stand on. You climb it anyway, muttering under your breath about structural integrity and the war effort, and how no one mentioned widows would also need to become amateur electricians. The bulb finally twists free and you feel a small, irrational sense of triumph. The kind of triumph people in the 1940s really should have gotten medals for. But then the pipes start knocking again. Loudly. Dramatically. As if the plumbing system has joined a percussion section without your approval. You tap the radiator with a wooden spoon, because that's something you've seen him do, and for about 3 seconds you feel accomplished until it knocks back even harder. You stare at it, exhausted, and ask the universe if this is personal. It is. The back gate is next. It always swung a little crooked, but now it behaves like it's re-enlisting for combat. Every time you close it, it pops open again, smacking the fence with a sound that could wake the dead, or at least wake your frustrations. You jiggle the latch, tighten a screw, and consider simply removing the entire gate and pretending your property line doesn't exist anymore. Boundaries are a luxury. Inside the house, the to-do list grows longer, the kitchen drawer sticks, the window in the living room whistles every time the wind blows, the wallpaper in the hallway is starting to peel, of course it is, curling like it's trying to slip away from the responsibility of being attached to your wall. You feel the same way. You move from task to task with the grim determination of someone who didn't want to become handy, but now has no choice. You hammer nails that go in crooked. You patch holes that weren't holes until you caused them. You fix what you can, ignore what you can't, and hope the neighbours aren't close enough to hear your running commentary about household mutiny. Sometimes, in the middle of all this chaos, you catch yourself talking to him. You'd know how to fix this, you mutter while staring down an aggressive sink drain. Or you swore you'd replace that hinge while wrestling the back gate into submission. It's not that you expect him to answer, it's that saying the words out loud gives you something to push against. And then there are moments of absurdity. Like the afternoon you try to unclog the faucet with a fork because the hardware store is out of tools, and the rationing office does not, in fact, accept emotional crises as a reason to acquire more. Or the time the curtain rod falls in the middle of the night and you sit up in bed, heart racing, convinced the house itself has declared war on you. You take breaks, because you have to. Moments where you sit on the floor with a cup of tea and stare at the wall, reminding yourself that no one, not even a wartime widow, was meant to manage grief and plumbing at the same time. Your hands shake sometimes, your breath catches, but you keep going, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, small victories start stacking up. A gate that stays shut, a pipe that quiets after you threaten it with divine judgment, a drawer that slides smoothly because you sanded the edges with the determination of someone who absolutely refuses to be defeated by furniture. Each tiny success reminds you of something important. You're learning to live in a world where you do things you never imagined you could do. Not because you want to, but because life insists on continuing even when hearts break. And the house, stubborn and creaky as it is, keeps standing, just like you. You never pictured yourself working in a smokestack factory, but here you are, tying your hair up in a handkerchief and stepping into the deafening roar of machines. The world didn't pause for your grief, it just handed you a time card. The walk to work is longer than it needs to be, mostly because it gives you time to adjust to the day's emotional weather. Some mornings you march with purpose, others you drag your feet like a child headed to a dentist appointment. The streets are crowded with women just like you, exhausted but determined, grieving but moving, wearing coats that aren't warm enough and shoes that have seen better decades. The factory whistle screams overhead, jolting everyone forward like cattle responding to a dinner bell, except instead of dinner you get 12 hours of noise and minor existential dread. Inside, the heat hits you first, thick, metallic, and mixed with the scent of oil, sweat, and whatever dignity everyone lost around hour 3 yesterday. Machines clatter in a rhythm that feels like someone dropped a marching band into an iron drum. You join the line of women grabbing gloves, hair scarves, and the morale equivalent of a deep sigh. You miss the days when your biggest workplace hazard was a splinter from the pantry shelf. Now you're surrounded by metal presses large enough to flatten you into a commemorative stamp. Training was quick. Don't stick your hand in, there was basically the entire course. After that, you were considered factory ready. Congratulations. You take your place at your station, the conveyor belt already rattling like it resents your presence. Your job is simple but exhausting. Assemble, tighten, repeat. 1,000 times a day. By lunchtime, your palms feel like they've lived through several lifetimes. Nobody warns you that grief feels heavier when your arms already ache. Around you, the other women talk, not loudly, shouting is the only way to be heard, and everyone's voice is already half broken from the noise, but enough to keep each other sane. They ask how you're holding up, though it's less a question and more a shared acknowledgement. We're all pretending to be fine, and that's okay. Some of them are widows too. Some have husbands still overseas. Some have husbands missing, which is a suspended grief that doesn't let you sit or stand without hurting. You bond through glances more than words, a quiet sisterhood formed through shared exhaustion and the mutual acceptance that war has shoved you into roles you didn't ask for. By mid-afternoon, your hair is plastered to your forehead, your arms are trembling, and you've inhaled enough factory air to qualify as 20% steel. You pause for water, warm water, because the break room tap hasn't produced anything cold since Hoover was president, and take a moment to just breathe. Grief sneaks up during these moments, slipping between thoughts like an unwanted draft. You blink hard, swallow harder, and return to the line. Your mind drifts to him sometimes, imagining what he'd say if he saw you now. Probably some encouragement, maybe a joke about your impressive bicep development, maybe a promise to give you a massage. It makes you smile, briefly, which feels like an emotional luxury. When the final whistle blows, it's less workday complete and more congratulations, you survived. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Your clothes smell like metal and exhaustion, and your mind is a blur of repetition. Tighten, fasten, lift, repeat. A rhythm you'll hear in your dreams later. The walk home is slower than the walk there. You feel flattened, stretched thin, and slightly unreal, like someone scraped out your insides and replaced them with fatigue. But there's also a strange sense of accomplishment, a whisper of strength beneath the exhaustion. You did it. You made it through another day. You kept the house afloat. You kept the world turning, at least in the tiny corner of it that depends on you. And you know you'll do it again tomorrow, not because you want to, but because that's what survival looks like now. And with each step, each shift, each long walk forward, you're learning something quietly powerful. You're stronger than you ever thought you'd have to be. You finally get paid and the number staring back at you seems like a mistake. It's half what a man would earn for the same job, but you don't have time to be outraged. Rent is due on Tuesday. You stand there in the factory office, holding the tiny slip of paper that is somehow supposed to keep your family afloat. The supervisor says something like, "Good work this week," but it sounds suspiciously like, "Consider yourself lucky." He nods with the proud confidence of a man who has never once worried about choosing between buying sugar or buying shoes for a growing child. Outside, the air smells like coal dust and unfulfilled dreams. You tuck the paycheck into your purse with the same care one uses to handle a fragile relic. A part of you wants to crumple it up dramatically, maybe throw it at a wall, maybe launch into a speech about wage equality that would shake the rafters and earn a standing ovation in a better timeline. But in this timeline, the landlord does not accept righteous anger as a form of payment. You start walking toward the bank feeling the weight of numbers in your pocket. Not enough numbers, never enough numbers. In school they taught you addition, subtraction, long division, but no one taught you how to stretch $1 into something that resembles a stable life. You pass shop windows filled with dresses you'll never buy and radios you'll never afford. Everything seems to cost more the moment you actually need it. At the bank, the teller gives you a sympathetic smile, the kind of smile that says, "Ah, another woman trying to single-handedly outrun poverty." You cash the check, fold the bills neatly, and place them in your wallet like they might evaporate if handled wrong. For a moment, you consider counting them again, hoping the math has suddenly changed. It hasn't. On the way home, you mentally map out the budget: rent, groceries, gas for the stove, your child's school shoes, the ones so worn the toes practically wave at passers-by. You calculate and recalculate until your head aches. No matter how you rearrange the numbers, they keep forming the same oblique puzzle. There is not enough of you to go around. Passing a group of men on their lunch break, you overhear them complaining about their measly pay. You bite your tongue because if you say anything, you'll either cry or accidentally reinvent feminism on the spot. Neither option seems appropriate for the sidewalk. Back home, you spread the bills on the kitchen table. The table is chipped, slightly uneven, and suddenly feels like a metaphor for everything in your life. You smooth the bills flat and stare at them as if they might multiply if given enough positive encouragement. They don't. You reach for the ration book next, because nothing says modern womanhood like comparing your income to how many ounces of butter you're allowed this month. Your child wanders in, asking what's for dinner. You smile and say something cheerful, because children deserve at least the illusion of stability. You tuck the money away, pull out a pot and start peeling potatoes, the emotional support vegetable of wartime America. As you cook, you think about him. Not about the telegram or the funeral you'll never have, but about how he used to sit at this very table, grumbling about bills, how he'd promised to work a little harder next month, how the two of you treated financial survival like a team sport, and now the whole field is yours and the game feels rigged. But somewhere between stirring the pot and setting the table, something shifts. Not a solution, just a small, stubborn flame of determination. You survived the telegram. You survived the first night alone. You survived the factory floor. You will survive this math too. Because even though the paycheck feels like a punch, you're still standing. Wobbly, tired, held together by caffeine and obligation, but standing. And standing in wartime is its own quiet form of victory. Every letter from overseas, even ones meant for neighbours, feels like a ghost brushing past you. You never stop tensing at envelopes. You never stop watching the road for uniforms. It's strange how quickly ordinary things become ominous. A mailbox used to represent cheerful holiday cards or advertisements for toasters you didn't need. Now it feels like a trapdoor. You open it slowly each day, bracing yourself for news that somehow found a way to deliver itself late, long after the original blow. You try to tell yourself it's irrational. You already received the worst possible letter, but grief is not guided by logic. It's guided by memory, instinct, and that relentless part of your brain that whispers, if bad things have happened once, they can happen again. You flinch when the postman's bicycle bell rings. You never used to notice it. Now it echoes like a warning, a tiny chime that sends your heartbeat sprinting. He gives you a sympathetic nod every time he approaches your house. You suspect he started sorting your mail last, giving himself a moment to prepare for whatever fragile expression you might wear that day. You appreciate the gesture, even if it makes you feel a little bit like a porcelain figurine someone's afraid to drop. Even letters addressed to others make your breath catch. You see a crisp envelope being delivered to Mrs. Alden down the street, the military seal stamped across the front, and your stomach drops even though you know, this time, it isn't for you. Grief has rewired your instincts. Any uniformed presence on your street feels like a threat, even if they're just delivering good news to someone else. You scan their expressions, searching for clues. Are they smiling, neutral, strained? It's a new skill, this reading of strangers' faces for signs of catastrophe. Children, of course, make things more complicated. Your child greets mail like it's a potential treasure map, asking, "Is it from Daddy?" Every time an envelope appears, you never fully answer. You just shake your head and redirect their attention to something safer, a storybook, a cookie, anything but the envelope that makes your pulse throb. You keep the contents of the mailbox as private as your tears. At the grocery store, you overhear casual gossip. Someone's husband missing, someone's brother wounded, someone's son last seen near a battle line no one can pronounce. It feels like the entire world is reading from the same stressful script. You walk home faster than usual, clutching your bag of potatoes like a shield. Some nights you can't sleep, imagining footsteps coming up the porch, the sound of shoes on wooden boards, slow and deliberate. You bolt upright, heart pounding, only to realize it's the neighbor returning late from a shift at the steel mill. You try to lie back down, but your mind replays the memory of your own knock at the door. The telegram boy shifting on his feet. The sun too bright for the moment it shattered your life. You tell yourself every morning that today will be better. Today you will not jump at the sound of the phone ringing. Today you will not check the mailbox twice, 3 times, 4 times. Today you will not imagine a soldier's silhouette at the end of your walkway. And some days you almost believe it. But then someone in town receives their own tragic news. A husband, a son, a fiancé, and the grief spreads like a ripple through the community. People lower their voices. Neighbours leave flowers on porches. The postman walks a little slower, and suddenly you're right back where you started, scanning every street corner for the next uniformed figure who might carry something unbearable. Still, there are small moments of relief when a bundle of bills arrives with nothing military among them, when the postman smiles a real smile instead of a cautious one, when a week passes without any new telegrams in town. You cling to these moments the way sailors cling to driftwood, not because they solve anything, but because they remind you you're still afloat. Grief does not end with one letter. It lingers in every envelope, every unexpected knock, every shadow on the road. But slowly, quietly, you begin to realize something else too. If bad news can arrive without warning, so can good days. Days when no letters come, days when the road stays empty. And someday, not soon, but someday, that will feel like peace. There's a quiet sisterhood forming in your town, women with hollow eyes, tight smiles, and a shared understanding that nobody else truly gets. You don't choose them. Life chooses for you. At first you try to avoid them, not because you dislike them, but because seeing your own grief reflected in someone else's face is almost too much. It's like staring into a mirror that shows your heart instead of your features, raw, cracked, and stitched together with determination. But you can't avoid them for long. Widows gravitate toward each other in wartime the way lanterns draw moths. The light isn't bright, but it's the only light around. The first time you join them, it's not intentional. You're at the grocer's, debating whether you can justify buying a real lemon for tonight's dinner, when Mrs. Clark appears beside you. She lost her husband last year, one of the early telegrams that left the whole town stunned. She touches your elbow gently and asks how you're holding up. Her voice is soft, steady, and you realise she's not asking out of curiosity. She's asking because she already knows the answer. Within minutes, 2 more women drift over. They're not coordinated, yet somehow perfectly synchronised. Grief has its own choreography. One adjusts her coat collar, another squeezes your hand, a third gives a small nod that communicates an entire paragraph. You're one of us now. We wish you weren't, but you are. Soon you start seeing them everywhere. Noticing one another becomes a kind of sixth sense. You can spot a widow by her walk, the slightly hunched posture of someone learning to carry more weight than any back was designed to hold. Or by her eyes, soft at the edges, sharp in the centre, scanning rooms for stability. You don't meet in any official capacity. There's no club, no rules, no secret knock. Just quiet gatherings that happen naturally. A few women sitting together at church, or lingering after the Sunday service, or sharing a bench in the park while their children play silently nearby. Their kids know too. They know not to talk about fathers except in whispers. There is comfort in their company, even when nothing is said. You sit shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by wool coats and sensible shoes, exchanging stories about leaky faucets, misbehaving children, and the strange cruelty of laundry that never stops. Occasionally someone shares a memory about her husband, spoken with a voice so steady you know she practiced it in private. But there are also moments of unexpected humour, the dark, absurd, survivor's kind. Someone jokes about how her late husband snored like a tractor, and for a brief second the whole group laughs, really laughs, because sometimes the only thing standing between you and despair is a shared memory of something ridiculous. They give advice too. Practical advice, like which factory foreman is fair, which isn't, and who will look the other way if you slip out early to tend to a sick child, or where to find black market stockings when rationing gets especially cruel, or how to make a funeral casserole stretch into 3 meals, a necessary art form in this new world. And when someone gets a new telegram because the war is still raging, still taking, the sisterhood shifts instantly. A widow is never left alone with fresh grief. One brings tea, one brings food, one brings a blanket, one brings silence, the kind that holds you up instead of swallowing you. You find yourself doing the same, almost without thinking. You show up at someone's door with a pot of stew and a soft voice. You sit next to her until her shaking stops. You share your story because stories, oddly enough, seem to lighten the weight. Slowly you begin to realize that being part of this unchosen sisterhood doesn't just tether you to loss, it also anchors you to resilience. These women have built lives out of ashes. They have steadied trembling hands and wiped tears with sleeves already damp from their own. They have kept going, and now, so have you. In their presence, your grief becomes less of a storm and more of a weather pattern, still heavy, still unpredictable, but survivable. You look around at their hollow eyes and tight smiles and understand, this is the army the home front never talks about, the one fighting a war nobody enlisted for, and somehow, being among them makes you feel just a little bit less alone in the rubble of your old life. The radio becomes your companion, filling the house with static news bulletins and songs that feel a little too romantic now. You keep it on because silence feels like surrender. You perch beside it the way some people sit with old friends, close enough to catch every whisper, but far enough to pretend you're not depending on it. The warm glow of the dial lights the room in soft amber, giving everything a faintly nostalgic tint. Even though nostalgia is the last thing your heart can manage, the radio crackles in and out as if it's clearing its throat before delivering yet another reminder that the world is balancing on a knife's edge. At 7 p.m, sharp comes the news broadcast, the one every household tunes into, willingly or not. Reports from overseas, updates on troop movements, casualty numbers spoken in clipped tones that betray nothing. You sit very still, breath held, waiting for the announcer to say something, anything, that will make the world feel less unsafe. He never does. Instead, he drones on with phrases like heavy fighting continued today, or no further information available. Those are the phrases you fear most. The vagueness, the uncertainty, the implication that behind the curtain, somewhere far away, chaos is unfolding faster than anyone can explain. After the news, the station shifts abruptly to music, as if trying to soothe a nation that can't be soothed. Big band numbers, sentimental ballads, patriotic marches. Before, you and he used to dance in the kitchen to these songs, clumsy, laughing, feet stepping on feet. Now the same melodies wrap around you like cold hands. You listen anyway, because turning them off feels too much like giving up on joy entirely. The radio becomes a stand-in for conversation. You talk back to it sometimes, muttering commentary at the announcers or whispering things you wish he could hear. Did you hear that? You say under your breath when some small glimmer of good news appears, even though the room remains stubbornly empty. Other nights, when they play a song he loved, you go still and let the memory wash over you, even if it stings. Then there are the programs, comedies, mysteries, variety hours, but they hit differently now. Jokes feel too loud, too forced. The punchlines land just short of where your laughter used to live. You try to enjoy them anyway, because pretending to be okay is the closest thing to relief you've got. Your child sometimes joins you, curling against your side, listening to the same programs with far more delight. You envy their innocence, the way they giggle at silly sound effects, the way a dramatic narrator can mesmerize them. They don't yet understand that the spaces between the static are where grown-ups store their worries. And then there are the nights when the radio delivers mail. Not physical mail, not letters, but the list of soldiers awarded medals, missing in action, confirmed dead. The names scroll past your ears like ghosts, each one a tiny wound. You tell yourself not to listen too closely, but you always do. You always will. Because even though you already received your letter, a part of you can't shake the fear that the world might have more ways to devastate you. Sometimes you fall asleep beside the radio, chin tucked to your chest, the final notes of a ballad fading into the soft hiss of static. When you wake, the room is dim, the house is quiet, and the radio is still murmuring faintly, refusing to let silence reclaim the night. You realize slowly that the radio isn't hope. It's not even comfort. It's simply company. A voice in the void, a reminder that somewhere out there, beyond your little house and your tired grief, millions of strangers are also listening, also waiting for news they're terrified to hear. And on the loneliest nights, when you feel like the rest of the world is slipping forward without you, that quiet companionship is enough. Not a cure, not a solution, but enough to get through one more dark, sleepless evening, enough to keep the silence from swallowing you whole. The military sends back a box with his watch, his dog tags, and a wedding ring they had the decency to wrap separately. You open it slowly like diffusing a bomb, because everything inside could unravel you. The cardboard is stiff, government-issued, and unforgivably plain. No softness, no comfort, no sign that someone packed this while imagining the hands that would receive it. A thin layer of brown paper rests on top, the kind meant for shipping, not cushioning hearts. You peel it back, fingertips trembling in a way that annoys you. You want to be steady. You want to be strong. Instead, you're made of glass. The first thing you notice is the smell. Faint, metallic, a little like machine oil and dust. It's the smell of distance, the smell of everything you couldn't protect him from. His watch lies on top, small and impossibly familiar. The leather strap is worn in all the places you'd expect, shaped to his wrist, softened by years of sweat, sun, and everyday life. You pick it up gently, holding it as though it might still tick if you listen closely enough. It doesn't. Of course it doesn't. Time stopped for this watch the same moment it stopped for him. Next are the dog tags. Two thin pieces of metal that feel far too cold for something that sat against his skin. They clink together softly, that unmistakable sound military wives learn to recognize from miles away. You run your thumb over the raised letters, memorizing the name you already know by heart, letting the metal press into your skin until your eyes burn. These were meant to identify him in the worst circumstances. They fulfilled their purpose. You hate them for it. Then there's the wedding ring, wrapped in tissue as if someone understood this item required reverence. It looks both exactly right and painfully wrong outside the context of his hand. You cradle it carefully, and for a moment, instinctively, your thumb rubs the inside edge the way you used to when you held his hand. That tiny gesture nearly splits you open. The bottom of the box holds smaller things, items no one thought to list in the official inventory. A couple of coins, a folded church bulletin, a pencil worn down to a nub, and then there's a photograph, the one you sent him months ago. It's creased, smudged, carried through battles and rainstorms and miles of marching. You stare at your own face as he last saw it, smiling, hopeful, unaware. You sit down slowly, as if your body is trying to lower itself without disturbing the fragile air in the room. The box rests in your lap, a container of everything he didn't get to take with him. You touch each item again, tracing memories around them like outlines. The watch reminds you of the mornings he'd rush to work, always late, always swearing it was the clock's fault. The dog tags recall the day he shipped out, the moment he tucked them beneath his shirt and told you he'd come home. The ring brings back the warmth of vows whispered under cheap decorations and hopeful hearts. You try to put the items back in the box, but your hands can't quite let go. Grief is greedy. It wants to hold everything at once, the pain, the memory, the proof. Eventually you place the lid on top, but you don't close it all the way. You leave it slightly ajar, as though closing it fully might make this loss too final. You set it on the table, stare at it for a long moment, and then look away. because staring too long feels like drowning. In the days that follow, the box becomes both a comfort and a threat. Some mornings you open it just to touch the ring. Other days you avoid it entirely. There is no correct way to grieve, no official instructions, ironic, considering the military sends instructions for everything else. But piece by piece, item by item, you begin making sense of it. Not in the way that means acceptance, but in the way that means survival. These objects, once extensions of him, are now anchors. They tether you to the love that existed before the telegram. They remind you that what you had was real, even if what remains fits into a box the size of a shoebox. And someday, not yet, but someday, opening it won't feel like defusing a bomb. It'll feel like lighting a candle. People keep telling you to stay strong for the country, as if grief is unpatriotic. You nod politely while thinking strength should really come with ration coupons attached. The words come from all directions: the grocer, the pastor, the lady who lives 3 houses down and always smells aggressively of lavender. They say it with earnest eyes, clutching your hands as if they're imparting sacred wisdom. Be brave, be strong, be proud, keep your chin up for America. As though patriotism is a magic ointment you can rub on the hollow ache inside your chest. You smile politely, because that's what wartime Americans do. Smiling is practically a civic duty now, the same way saving bacon grease or knitting socks has become a contribution to the cause. But every time someone tells you the country needs you to be resilient, you quietly wonder why the country didn't consider your resilience before sending the man you loved into danger. At church, the preacher's sermons shift. He starts talking about sacrifice, noble sacrifice, holy sacrifice, words that float through the sanctuary like incense. You sit in your pew, hands folded in your lap, hearing your husband's death framed as an inspirational anecdote for spiritual uplift. You try not to roll your eyes, probably not appropriate during a hymn. Then there are the posters. Everywhere you go, they loom above you, Rosie flexing her muscles, Uncle Sam pointing dramatically, slogans about duty, honour, endurance. You can't buy toothpaste without passing propaganda urging you to remain cheerful, industrious, and grateful. Grateful. As if there is something inherently uplifting about raising a child alone. The most exhausting conversations are with people who think they're comforting you by reframing your loss as a moral victory. He died a hero. At least he served his country. You must be so proud. You are proud, of course. You loved a man who believed in something larger than himself. But pride and grief are not mutually exclusive. They simply share a room, sitting back to back, refusing to look at each other. Sometimes someone implies, gently, unintentionally, that your sadness is a liability, as if crying too loudly might undermine morale, as if the home front is balancing on a tightrope of good spirits, and your tears might snap it. You go home afterward with a strange guilt bubbling under your ribs. You shouldn't have to apologize for being human, but the pressure hangs in the air like humidity. The hardest part is how the expectations sneak into your own thoughts. You tell yourself to be brave for the children, for the neighbours, for him. You rehearse strength in the mirror. You tuck grief neatly into corners where it won't make anyone uncomfortable. Some days you even convince yourself that your sorrow should have an expiration date, as if war grief can be packed into tidy jars like rationed jam. And yet, there are moments when patriotism becomes unexpectedly soft, human, almost comforting. When another war widow squeezes your hand during the Pledge of Allegiance. When a factory supervisor quietly rearranges your shift after noticing you look pale. When the town raises a flag at half-staff and for once it feels like your loss is seen, not just categorized. Still, the awkward dance continues. People keep expecting you to be both a symbol of national resilience and a functioning individual who never misplaces her car keys or burns dinner. You walk the line carefully. Too much stoicism and they think you're cold. Too much sorrow and they think you're fragile. The truth is, your patriotism didn't die with him. It just changed shape, became quieter, less poster-worthy, more rooted in everyday survival. Your love for your country is now tangled with your longing for the life you lost, a complicated braid of honor and heartbreak. So when someone tells you to stay strong for America, you smile politely, even though you're thinking, I'm staying strong for my child. I'm staying strong because grief won't wash the dishes. I'm staying strong because I promised myself I would. Strength doesn't look like the posters. It looks like you, tired, grieving, determined, still putting one foot in front of the other. And if that isn't patriotic, then nothing is. You're grocery shopping, minding your own business, when the store radio starts playing your song, the one he whistled off key. Your knees go weak somewhere between canned peaches and powdered milk. It starts innocently, just a few soft notes drifting out from the tinny overhead speaker, barely audible over the clatter of carts and the chatter of housewives debating the quality of a wartime margarine. But the moment you recognize the melody, everything else fades. The aisle stretches, the floor tilts, and suddenly the grocery store becomes the most emotionally dangerous place in America. You grip the handle of your cart, knuckles whitening as your heart performs a small, tragic somersault. You know this song too well, not just the tune, but the way he used to hum it absent-mindedly while shaving, or whistle the chorus in a rhythm so inconsistent you'd tease him about it. Now the familiar notes hit you like a punch, landing in a spot you thought you'd fortified. You pretend to examine a can of evaporated milk deeply, almost academically, because crying next to the dairy shelf doesn't feel socially acceptable in 1943. The other shoppers weave around you, unaware that you're currently fighting for emotional survival. Mrs. Thompson passes by with a jar of pickles and gives you a polite nod, blissfully oblivious to the fact that your entire heart just imploded near shelf B4. The song swells, as much as a grocery store speaker can swell, and you feel tears prick the corners of your eyes. Not big dramatic tears, you're too tired for that, but the soft, quiet ones that slip through before you can stop them. You blink rapidly, the universal signal for I'm fine. Nothing to see here, but the tune keeps playing, refusing to let you escape. You think of the nights the two of you danced in the kitchen, swaying slightly out of rhythm because he couldn't follow a beat to save his life. You think of the evenings when he'd hum the song to calm the baby, even though the result sounded more like a distant train whistle than a lullaby. Memory, it turns out, is very rude about timing. You push your cart away from the aisle, trying to outpace the sound. But the universe, in its infinite sense of humour, ensures the song follows you, echoing faintly across every corner of the store. You head toward the produce section, still playing. You duck behind a display of potatoes, still playing. You consider hiding in the stockroom, but decide that might be too dramatic, even for grief. At one point, the store clerk, a teenage boy with too much energy and not enough awareness, asks if you need help finding something. My composure, you think, but you smile and shake your head. He wanders off, whistling a tune dangerously close to the one you're trying not to break apart over. Eventually the song ends, abruptly, almost cruelly. It stops mid-melody, replaced by an upbeat patriotic jingle, urging everyone to buy war bonds. You stand there, stunned, because grief doesn't immediately turn off when the music does. Your chest is tight, your throat aching, your palms damp against the cart handle. You take a deep breath, steady, slow, the way you've learned to do when the world tilts unexpectedly. The store comes back into focus. The clink of glass bottles, the buzz of conversation, the squeak of carts. Life continues, stubborn and indifferent. You wipe your eyes discreetly, pretending to adjust your hair. No one notices. Or maybe they do, and choose kindness by pretending they don't. You place a few items into your cart: canned soup, flour, a loaf of bread that looks slightly stale but workable. Routine steadies you. Movement steadies you. On the walk home, the memory of the song lingers like a bruise. It hurts, yes, but in a strange way it also warms you. Music is a thief and a comforter, stealing breath while returning pieces of love you thought you'd lost. That tiny moment in the grocery store, painful as it was, reminds you that what you had with him was real enough to echo through loudspeakers long after he's gone. When you reach your porch, you pause, letting the cool air settle your heartbeat. You're still standing. You survived another unexpected ambush from the past. And in this new version of your life, that counts as progress. You filled out so many forms, you're convinced the government could resurrect him faster than they can process a widow's benefit. This stack of paperwork sits on your kitchen table like a second, significantly more boring telegram. Every form seems to demand something emotionally compromising. A date, a signature, a memory, as if grief weren't already doing enough paperwork in your heart. You pull up a chair, sigh, and sharpen a pencil, because apparently this is the only weapon you're allowed to wield in wartime bureaucracy. The first form asks for his service number. You know it by heart now, even though you'd never tried to memorize it. It lives in your mind the same way a splinter lives in skin. Small, sharp, impossible to ignore. You write it slowly, making the numbers neat, as if precision will make this process kinder. Next, they ask for your marriage certificate. You dig it out of the drawer with all the other important documents: birth certificates, insurance policies, a doodle your child swears is a horse. You unfold the marriage certificate carefully, the creases worn soft from years of being tucked away. You remember signing it in better times, the ink of hope still fresh. Now the government wants multiple copies. Of course they do. You trudge down to the town clerk's office, clutching the original like a fragile relic. The clerk, a man who looks like he's been inhaling dust since the Harding administration, hands you a form to request more forms. You stare at it for a moment, resisting the urge to laugh or scream. He nods sympathetically, which somehow makes everything worse. Back home, you reassemble the growing mountain of documents. You've got affidavits, declarations, statements of dependency, forms verifying that you are in fact still alive. You begin to wonder whether the military thinks grief causes amnesia. Then come the questions. Were you financially dependent on your husband? You blink at the page. In 1943. What a whimsical question. Did he contribute to the household income? You consider writing. Unless you count emotional support and bad jokes as income, yes. Do you plan to remarry? Absolutely not. Or maybe one day. Or maybe the form could mind its own business. You leave the line blank, hoping no one will notice. Each envelope you prepare requires postage, which requires ration points, which requires standing in line at the post office listening to Mrs. Alden loudly explained her conspiracy theory that the government intentionally loses paperwork so widows can't get rich off tragedy. You resist pointing out that tragedy isn't exactly a profitable career path. When you finally mail everything, you expect relief. Instead, you get silence. Weeks of it. Weeks of checking the mailbox like it owes you money. Weeks of rehearsing answers for questions no one asks. Weeks of imagining a desk somewhere piled high, with widow's claims while a tired clerk debates whether to take lunch early. Eventually you receive a letter. Not the letter, just a letter. A polite notification informing you that one of your forms was missing a signature. You consider signing your actual soul over just to speed up the process. You return the corrected document, exhausted yet determined. The system is slow, but you refuse to let it grind you down entirely. Not after everything else you've survived. In the meantime, you learn unexpected lessons. You learn that bureaucratic resilience is its own kind of strength. You learn the exact weight of a stamped envelope. You learn that writing your name 27 times in one afternoon has a strangely meditative quality, like grief yoga, but with more paperwork. And slowly, painfully, progress arrives. A small check in the mail, a confirmation letter, a note informing you that your claim has been processed, approved, filed, and stamped with whatever magic government seal certifies that your suffering counts in an official capacity. It's not a victory parade. It's not a cure. But it is one more hurdle you've cleared, one more thing you didn't think you could do, until you did. And as you place the final approved document into your filing drawer, you feel something unfamiliar. Competence. Quiet, tired, hard-earned competence. The maze didn't defeat you. It didn't resurrect him, but somehow it helped resurrect a small part of you. You smile, clap, and pretend you're fine, but every vow feels like a bruise. You go home early and cry into a pillow that still smells faintly like him. The invitation arrived weeks ago. A cheerful envelope with elegant handwriting that felt almost accusatory. You tucked it under a stack of bills, hoping the sheer weight of responsibility would crush it into oblivion. No such luck. Weddings have a way of insisting on themselves. Eventually you smoothed the envelope open, stared at the glittering script, and accepted, not because you wanted to, but because saying no felt like admitting you were falling apart, and you've spent months convincing everyone, including yourself, that you're not. The church is decorated with white ribbons and lilies, the scent of hope thick in the air. Everyone is dressed in their wartime best, the kind of outfits patched so cleverly you can't tell where the original fabric ends. You take a seat near the back, clutching your small purse as if it might shield you from incoming emotional shrapnel. At first, it's manageable. There's soft music, whispered greetings, dresses rustling, and that bubbly pre-ceremony anticipation. You even manage a smile at the flower girl, who takes her job so seriously she looks like she might arrest anyone who steps on a petal. But then the groom appears, standing proudly, nervously, with hope radiating off him like heat from a stove burner. Hope is what breaks you. The kind of open, fearless hope you once had. The kind of hope you buried the moment a telegram boy walked up your path. You breathe through it. Slow, controlled. You can survive this, you tell yourself, the way a sailor might whisper encouragement before walking into a storm. But then the bride enters, glowing with the soft confidence of someone who believes in all the tomorrow she's about to promise. And that's when something inside you clenches, tight and hot. The vows begin, each word landing with surgical precision, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. You feel that last one like a strike to the sternum. Death already did its part, and here you sit in the aftermath, listening to two people swear a lifetime you now know can be interrupted by forces neither love nor courage can stop. You smile for the photos, you clap during the kiss, you even force yourself to attend the reception, where sandwiches and lemonade make their wartime appearance. The music is cheerful, the newlyweds are radiant, the guests are tipsy on joy, and you stand at the edge of the room, a spectator at the border between past and possibility. People chat with you politely, though their eyes slide away when conversation drifts too near anything deeper than weather. You sip your punch and nod along, feeling like you're wrapped in a thin layer of glass, present, visible, but unreachable. Then someone asks, "Isn't love beautiful?" You swallow hard, because yes it is, and yes it was, and the reminder feels like both a blessing and a wound. You slip out before the dancing begins, making an excuse about work in the morning. No one questions it. Widows get a kind of diplomatic immunity from social obligations, though no one says it out loud. At home, you peel off your shoes and collapse face first onto the bed. The pillow still carries traces of him, faint, almost gone, but enough to make your heartbeat stutter. You hold it close, letting the tears come because you've held your composure hostage for hours and it's finally breaking free. It's not jealousy you feel. It's not bitterness either. It's the ache of remembering what it felt like to stand at an altar believing in decades, believing you'd grow old together, believing that vows were as solid as the church walls around you. But here's the quiet truth you discover as you drift into exhausted sleep. Your grief isn't a rejection of their happiness, it's a remembrance of your own. And even though tonight hurt, you survived it. You walked through love's echo and came out standing. One day, weddings won't feel like battlefields, but tonight surviving was enough. Some people think you should move on immediately. Others think you should stay loyal until death. Everyone has an opinion, and none of them have to live your life. It begins subtly at first, a comment slip between polite conversation and a casserole dish. "You're still young," someone says, with the tone of a person recommending a bargain at the grocery store. Plenty of nice men out there. You smile tightly, resisting the urge to ask where exactly these nice men are hiding during wartime scarcity, because they are certainly not making an appearance in your neighbourhood unless you count the milkman, and he's older than your father. Then the pendulum swings the other way. A different neighbour, equally earnest, corners you after church. "A good wife honours her first marriage forever," she whispers dramatically, as though she's passing state secrets. Real love doesn't fade. You nod politely, even though internally you're thinking real love would probably want you to eventually eat dinner with someone who can hold a conversation, and not just echo inside your own head. It's astonishing how boldly people will share opinions about a life they don't have to live. They treat remarriage like a community project, something everyone gets a vote on, as if your heart is a ballot box and they're stuffing in suggestions like widows should wait at least 5 years, or a child needs a father figure, or Bachelor Johnson down the road is looking for company. You begin to suspect that half these recommendations are less about your happiness and more about solving their perceived social inconveniences. The factory women have their own version of the commentary. Some encourage you gently. "If you ever do want to date again, don't feel guilty," one says, wiping grease from her hands. Others are more blunt. "Men die, sweetheart. Life keeps going. You appreciate the honesty, though the delivery could use some softening, maybe with a cup of tea or a hug." Then there's the widow's circle, the quiet sisterhood of women who've lived the same nightmare. Their perspective is softer, kinder. They don't give directives, they simply share stories. One woman remarried after 2 years, another after 10, another never did. There's no timeline, they tell you. Just the moment your heart decides you're ready, or the moment it decides you're not. It's the calmest advice you receive, and the only advice that doesn't make you want to throw a shoe. Still, the community chatter continues. Some people drop hints so loudly it's practically acoustic assault. Others hint in quieter, more conspiratorial tones, the kind that suggest matchmaking plots are underway. You find out accidentally that 2 ladies from the neighbourhood have already discussed pairing you with a widower who raises chickens. Not because you like chickens, but because he seems stable. Apparently poultry is now a relationship qualifier. But the real confusion comes from inside yourself. Some mornings you wake up thinking you won't love anyone again, that the chapter is closed. Other mornings you feel a flicker of curiosity about what companionship might look like years from now. Not romance necessarily, just someone to talk to in a kitchen where silence doesn't echo so sharply. And that's the part people don't understand. You're not making a decision tomorrow, or next month, or even next year. You're still figuring out how to get through breakfast without feeling hollow. Grief doesn't release you quickly. It's patient, clingy, a house guest who overstays its welcome. Eventually, after enough unsolicited lectures, you develop a reflex. When someone offers strong opinions about your remarriage prospects, you tilt your head, smile warmly, and respond with something vague like, "Oh, life has its own plans." This satisfies them, mostly because they hear what they want in the silence. But the truth, the quiet, sacred truth, is that your heart will choose its own path in its own time. It doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Not your neighbours, not your church, not society, not even the war that rearranged your whole world. You are the only one who has to live inside this grief, and you will be the only one who decides when, or if, a new chapter begins. Until then, you give thanks that opinions aren't rationed, because if they were, your whole town would have run out months ago. One random afternoon, something actually makes you laugh, really laugh, and the guilt hits you so fast it steals the air from your lungs. Happiness feels like betrayal. It comes out of nowhere. You're sweeping the kitchen or folding laundry or listening to your child tell a story that makes absolutely no logical sense. And then something sparks. A tiny joke, a silly gesture, a memory that warms instead of wounds. You laugh, a small, yelp, bright sound that escapes before you can stop it. The moment it leaves your mouth, you freeze. Your heart drops into your stomach. Your breath stutters, because laughing feels wrong, like you've crossed an invisible line into a place you're not allowed to visit yet. As if joy is reserved for people who haven't lost what you've lost. You sit down, because suddenly sitting feels safer than standing, and the guilt floods in hot and choking. How dare you laugh? How dare you find anything funny when the world took him away? The sound of your own joy echoes in your ears like a confession. You press a hand to your chest, trying to steady the ache. It's not the grief itself that surprises you anymore. It's how grief reacts to everything else, like an overprotective guard dog snarling at any emotion that isn't sorrow. The rest of the day feels off-kilter. You move through chores with a strange heaviness, as though the universe is scrutinizing your every move. You imagine him watching you, not disapproving, just absent. And absence has a way of rewriting the rules of your heart. For days afterward, you avoid anything that might be funny. You turn off the radio when comedic programs start. You politely leave conversations when neighbours begin sharing amusing stories. You narrow your emotional world to quiet, safe things grief approves of. But life doesn't cooperate. One morning, your child trips over their own shoelaces, pops up dramatically and declares, "The floor attacked me." You bite the inside of your cheek. You try to keep your face neutral, but a tiny smile betrays you. Grief growls. You swallow it down. Another time, the cat steals a biscuit off the counter and parades around as if displaying a military medal. You don't laugh, not out loud, but your shoulders shake for a moment before that familiar guilt clamps down again. It's exhausting. This emotional tug-of-war. Grief says, "You're not ready." Life says, "Too bad, I'm still happening." One evening, after your child is asleep, you sit on the edge of your bed and finally let yourself ask the forbidden question. If he were here, would he want you to stop laughing forever? You picture him, the way he used to make ridiculous faces just to break tension, or tell jokes so bad you couldn't help but laugh at their sheer awfulness. He loved your laugh. He sought it out, protected it, nourished it. Would he really want it to die with him? A tear rolls down your cheek, quiet and slow, carrying the weight of that answer. The guilt doesn't disappear, not entirely, but it loosens, a fraction. Enough to let in one small truth. Your laughter doesn't erase him. It doesn't replace him. It doesn't diminish the love or the loss. It simply means you're still alive. And being alive comes with involuntary side effects, like laughter, breath, sunlight, warmth, things you didn't ask for but still receive, even on the days you feel you don't deserve them. In the weeks that follow, you start allowing tiny moments of joy, slipping them into your grief like secret notes. A smile at a child's joke, a chuckle at a comedy broadcast, a genuine laugh shared with another widow who understands the absurdity of surviving heartbreak in wartime. You don't announce it. You don't celebrate it. You just let it happen, slowly, tentatively, like learning to walk again. Because healing isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's a quiet return of things you thought you'd buried forever. And one day, not soon, but someday, you'll laugh without guilt. Not because you've forgotten him, but because part of loving him means carrying forward the joy he gave you, even now, even after everything. You hang the stockings, wrap the gifts, and pretend everything is normal, but his absence wraps itself around the room like a cold draft. Christmas used to be his holiday. He'd hum carols off-key while untangling lights, wrap presents with the precision of someone defusing a bomb, and insist on baking at least one pie despite a track record of pies that could double as improvised weapons. The season felt warm because he filled it. Now every ornament glints a little too sharply, every string of garland droops with a weight that has nothing to do with gravity. You try to keep busy. Decorating has become both task and emotional camouflage. You hang a wreath on the door, straighten candles on the mantel, and strategically place pine branches in places Martha Stewart hasn't even imagined yet. Anything to avoid the quiet. Anything to avoid looking at that chair. The chair sits at the table like a ghost. Not literally, although if ghosts do exist, this seems like prime haunting real estate, but symbolically, painfully. You set the table, placing plates and silverware with slow, deliberate care. When you reach a spot, your hand hesitates. You feel foolish for pausing. You feel worse for noticing that you paused. You skip the setting entirely, deciding it's easier to pretend you've downsized your table. Your child, of course, notices none of this. Children are brilliant at focusing on the magic instead of the missing. They chatter about Santa, about snow, about whether reindeer prefer oats or cookies. You smile along, grateful for the distraction, but your heart aches anyway. Not just for you, but for the Christmas they should have had. The one with two parents sneaking around at midnight, whispering about hiding places and presents that won't fit under the tree. When the evening comes, neighbours stop by with well-meaning cheer. They drop off tins of cookies, brittle sugar, crumbling gingerbread, a few that taste like someone misunderstood cinnamon's purpose. You thank them warmly, even though their smiles press on your bruised feelings like fingers testing a sore muscle. Then comes the caroling. It used to make you smile, the slightly off-key harmonies, the fact that Mr. Jenkins always sang too loudly, the way children rang mismatched bells with reckless enthusiasm. This year, the music hits differently. The lyrics about joy and peace feel like they're meant for someone else. Someone in a parallel universe where the war didn't steal husbands, where telegram boys were always delivering harmless news. Later, after the cocoa is made and your child is asleep, you sit in the glow of the tree. The house is quiet in that thick, wintry way, as though the walls themselves are holding their breath. You pick up his stocking, the one with the fraying edge, because he always insisted it gave it character. You turn it over in your hands, unsure whether to hang it or pack it away. Hanging it feels like denial. Packing it away feels like betrayal. You leave it folded on your lap instead, as if delaying the decision delays the pain. When morning comes, you go through the motions. You pour orange juice. You peel potatoes for dinner. You roast a chicken instead of a turkey because rationing is a merciless Grinch. You guide your child through presents and squeals and paper snowstorms. You even laugh, a soft, genuine one, when a toy immediately breaks and your child blames manufacturing flaws. But the moment you all sit down to dinner, the moment forks touch plates and conversation falls into a familiar rhythm, the emptiness of that chair rings louder than any Christmas bell. You stare at it without meaning to. Not long, just long enough for memory to slip in, uninvited and sharp. You remember his laughter at last year's feast, the way he carved the turkey like an overconfident surgeon, how he kissed your forehead when the kitchen filled with smoke because he forgot to set a timer. This year, the smoke is only in your chest. You take a deep breath and remind yourself gently that grief is not a flaw in the holiday. It's just proof that something beautiful once lived here. And while the ache doesn't disappear, not today, not anytime soon, it sits beside you quietly, like an old companion learning not to take up too much room. Some Christmases are magical, some are heavy, and some, like this one, are simply survived. Surviving, you remind yourself, counts as its own kind of miracle. You open his closet one day, not on purpose, and the smell of his jacket hits you like a memory you weren't prepared for. You close the door and sit on the floor until the world stops spinning. It's ridiculous, you think, how something as simple as opening the wrong door can unravel you. You weren't searching for anything emotional. You were just looking for an extra blanket or the box of sewing things you swear you left on the top shelf. But then the closet cracked open and the familiar scent drifted out, a blend of soap, worn leather, and whatever indefinable warmth he always carried with him. It hits you with surgical precision, catching you off guard the way only grief knows how. You slide down the wall, letting yourself sink onto the hardwood floor, palms pressed flat, grounding yourself while your pulse tries to gallop out of your chest. His presence is so suddenly, absurdly there that it feels like he might step out of the closet any second, shrugging into his jacket, announcing he's late for work again. The mind is cruel like that, supplying ghosts where reality refuses to cooperate. Eventually you stand, slowly, carefully, as though the act of opening a closet might require protective gear. You ease the door open a second time, on purpose now, the way you might approach a skittish animal. The air is still infused with him. You breathe it in because you can't not. You grip the door frame because you need to. His clothes hang exactly where he left them. Press shirts from church, work overalls with a rip in the knee you always meant to fix, the jacket he wore on your last night out together. The sleeves drape downward as if they remember the shape of his arms. You reach out but stop short, your fingertips hovering just above the fabric, unsure whether touching it will break you or tether you. You finally lift the jacket from the hanger. It's heavier than you remember. You press it to your chest, closing your eyes as the scent envelops you. The closest thing to an embrace you've had in months. The grief is immediate and overwhelming, but within it is something softer too. Love, memory, the echo of a life lived together. You sit on the edge of the bed with the jacket in your lap. Your child wanders in at one point, sees what you're doing and quietly backs away, somehow understanding this is a moment meant for one heart only. The understanding, sweet as it is, nearly cracks you again. You look around the room and see his belongings everywhere. Items you've walked past 1,000 times without noticing. A watch on the dresser. A book with a folded page marking the spot where he stopped reading. A worn pair of boots by the door, still dusted with dirt from the last place he walked. Each object feels sacred now, charged with the emotional electricity of something frozen in time. You try sorting some things, telling yourself you're being practical, organising, tidying. But practicality dissolves quickly. The first drawer you open contains a stack of letters he meant to send, receipts you don't understand, and a photograph of you tucked behind a ration book. You close the drawer immediately, overwhelmed by the evidence of a life that ended in the middle of ordinary days. For a moment you consider boxing everything up, sealing the pain away like an attic full of old memories. But then you imagine the silence that would replace these items. A house stripped of his presence might be tidy, but it would also be unbearable. So you return the jacket to the hanger, smoothing the fabric with a tenderness you didn't know your hands could still hold. You leave the closet door slightly ajar, a small rebellion against compartmentalizing grief. Letting it breathe feels easier than pretending it can be packed away. As you step back, you realize something quietly profound. Handling his belongings isn't just about mourning what you lost. It's about honoring what you had. Every shirt, every worn-out boot, every scrap of fabric carries the weight of a shared life. A life that touched you deeply. A life that still lingers in the scent of a jacket waiting patiently behind a half-open door. And even though the loneliness is sharp, piercing, relentless, it's also a reminder of love big enough to echo long after he's gone. Changing tires, negotiating bills, fixing leaky faucets. You become both parents, both partners, both halves of a life you never planned to manage alone. It starts gradually, a loose doorknob here, a stubborn stove burner there, small tasks you used to hand off without thinking. "I'll get to it," he'd say, with that confident grin that meant he absolutely wouldn't get to it until reminded 3 more times. Now, there's no one left to nudge. No one to call from the other room when the radio fizzles or the drawer jams. You stare at the faulty thing in question and realize with a sinking feeling it's just you versus the household now, and the household has declared war. The first time you change a tire, it's out of sheer necessity. The car makes a noise that sounds like a pigeon having a meltdown, and when you pull over, the tire is flatter than your emotional resilience after receiving a telegram. You stand there for a moment, pretending the problem will fix itself. It doesn't, so you roll up your sleeves, mutter a few choice words you hope your child doesn't overhear, and wrestle with the jack like you're in a boxing match. When you finally succeed, you sit on the curb, grease on your cheek, heart pounding, and almost laugh. Not because it was fun, but because doing something you never imagined you'd have to do feels like a bizarre rite of passage. Bills come next, a scavenger hunt of numbers, deadlines, and cryptic fees that seem designed to test your sanity. You become fluent in customer service hold music. You master the art of sounding assertive despite wanting to crawl under a blanket and let someone else handle grown-up problems. The first time you negotiate a reduced fee, you feel a burst of triumph so strong it nearly sends you levitating. And then there's plumbing, nature's way of reminding you that water is both essential and deeply vindictive. The sink starts leaking, not dramatically, just enough to create a rhythmic dripping that echoes through the night like a taunt. You try tightening a bolt, then another, then all of them. The pipe sprays you in the face, and for a brief moment, you consider filing an official complaint with the universe. But eventually, miraculously, you get it to stop. You stand there, soaked and triumphant, and whisper, "I dare anyone to mess with me now." Your child watches all of this with wide eyes. You're not just teaching them life skills, you're teaching them resilience in real time. They hand you tools, pass you screws, and celebrate your victories with the enthusiasm of a parade captain. Their belief in you becomes a kind of fuel, steady and warm, even when you're exhausted. Of course, some tasks go less smoothly, like the time you tried to patch a hole in the wall and created a slightly larger hole, or when you attempted to fix a wobbly table leg and accidentally made it wobblier, or when you lit the pilot light on the stove and nearly gave yourself a new hairstyle. But even then, especially then, you learn something. You're more capable than you realized. And somewhere in the chaos of learning these unasked for skills, something unexpected happens. Your confidence grows. Quietly, stubbornly, like a weed pushing through concrete. You start approaching problems with a new kind of determination, not because you want to be a one-woman repair team, but because you've proven to yourself that you can be. You never wanted this version of life. You never asked to become both halves of a partnership. But here you are, managing, adapting, becoming stronger in the soft, gritty, unglamorous way only wartime widows ever truly understand. One day, while tightening a hinge or balancing a checkbook, you realize something gently profound. You're not replacing him. You're not becoming him. You're becoming you, the version of yourself shaped by love, loss, and the quiet courage of doing things you never thought you could do. And that somehow is its own kind of victory. You're the emotional anchor now, even when you feel like drifting into pieces. Everyone thinks you're strong. No one sees you crying silently into dishwater. It happens slowly, almost without your permission. People begin leaning on you. Neighbors ask for help. Family members send their worries your way like you're a mailbox that accepts emotional postage. Your child looks at you with wide, expectant eyes, trusting you to know what to do, how to fix everything, how to make a world at war feel safe. And because you love them fiercely, endlessly, you rise to the occasion. You lift the weight others hand you, you nod softly. You offer soothing words in a steady voice that doesn't match the trembling in your chest. You become the dependable one, the capable one, the she's doing so well one. What no one sees is the version of you who pauses in the kitchen, hands submerged in soapy water, tears blend in with the suds. Dishwater is merciful that way, quiet, warm, a place where grief can mix unnoticed. You stand there, breathing slowly, trying not to let one sniffle become a landslide. Everyone wants you to be okay. Not because they're cruel, but because your strength makes their world feel steadier. If you can survive this, maybe everything else is survivable too. People cling to that illusion without realizing it's costing you something. Pieces of yourself you haven't had time or space to mourn. At the factory, women pull you aside, confiding their fears. Workers who barely know you say things like, "You're so composed," or "I don't know how you do it." You want to answer honestly, "Neither do I." But the words catch. You nod instead, offering comfort like it's a ration item you have to distribute sparingly. Even at home, strength becomes a performance. Your child cries at night, missing him, and you hold them close, whispering soft reassurances. "We're okay. We're going to be okay." You say it so often it becomes a strange lullaby. You don't dare imagine what would happen if you admitted you don't always believe it. Loneliness creeps in during the in-between moments, brushing your hair in the morning, stirring soup in the evening, folding laundry at night. Grief rarely attacks dramatically. It prefers ambushing you during chores. You stare out the window for a moment too long and suddenly your throat tightens, your breath shortens. You blink hard because the world cannot see you fracture. Not right now. Not when someone might need something from you in the next 10 minutes. There is an odd kind of heroism in everyday holding it together. It doesn't come with medals or ceremonies. It comes with headaches and stiff shoulders and emotional splinters. You become fluent in phrases like, "Don't worry and I've got it," and "We'll figure it out." They roll off your tongue with practiced ease, even when your insides feel like unstable ground. Sometimes, late at night, after the house finally stops demanding things from you, you sit on the edge of the bed and let the air out of your lungs slowly. You let yourself sag. You let the strong facade slip. There is no applause for these moments, no witness, no one to say you're allowed to fall apart. But the release is necessary, a quiet exhale of all the things you couldn't say during the day. And yet, here's the part that surprises you. Beneath the exhaustion, beneath the bone-deep sadness, beneath the pressure to hold everyone together, there's something else growing, something steady, something stubborn. Resilience. Not the loud, shiny resilience people talk about in speeches, the soft kind, the quiet kind, The kind you build washing dishes, paying bills, wiping tears, showing up again and again when you have every reason not to. You're not strong because you want to be, or because you don't break. You're strong because you break in silence, then stand back up when no one is watching. And someday, not soon, but someday, you'll look back and realize something incredible. You were your own anchor all along. Couples hold hands, babies are born, people laugh in movie theatres. The world spins on as if your entire universe didn't just collapse months ago. It's jarring at first. The sheer indifference of life continuing without consulting you. You step outside for groceries or work or sheer obligation, and everything looks suspiciously normal. A couple sharing a milkshake at the soda counter, teenagers flirting awkwardly over comic books, a woman scolding her dog for stealing a loaf of bread right off her porch. The world is still busy being the world, unchanged, unbothered, completely unaware that you're walking around with an entire fault line running down your chest. You don't begrudge anyone their happiness, not really, but it stings. It stings in the way lemon juice stings a paper cut. Not fatal, but excruciatingly precise. You find yourself watching strangers the way someone studies artifacts in a museum, carefully, almost enviously, as if their joy belongs to a species that has gone extinct in your home. At the factory, women chat about weekend plans and family dinners and their children's antics, and you nod along, but it feels like you're underwater, watching their words ripple past you without quite reaching. You want to participate. You want to smile at the silly stories and nod at the frustrations. But there's a barrier you didn't ask for, invisible yet unmistakable. Your grief sitting between you and the rest of humanity like a thick pane of glass. Movie theatres are the worst. You go because your child wants to, and you're trying so hard to give them pieces of normalcy. You sit in the dark, popcorn in hand, and watch other people laugh freely at jokes that don't quite land for you. Their laughter is loud, full-bodied, carefree. Yours, if it comes at all, is thin, more a polite acknowledgement than amusement. And that contrast reminds you sharply of the last time you two went to the movies together and whispered commentary about the plot under your breath, trying not to get shushed. Even the seasons seem rude in their consistency. Spring arrives with flowers that don't match your internal weather. Summer brings sunlight that feels too warm, too indifferent to the ache it illuminates. Fall places golden leaves at your feet like offerings you never asked for. Winter blankets the world in a peaceful quiet that only makes your loneliness echo louder. The resentment isn't loud or dramatic. It's subtle, creeping, the kind that shows up in small moments, like when you see a man buying flowers for his sweetheart and feel your throat tighten, or when a family walks past you, laughing loudly, and you instinctively turn away, or when you hear a woman complain that her husband leaves his socks everywhere and you think, with a pang so sharp it makes you dizzy, what a luxury, to be irritated instead of grieving. People tell you time heals. People tell you the world keeps turning. People tell you life goes on, as if the phrase itself is a balm. But they don't tell you that watching life go on without the person you loved feels like betrayal. Not by them, but by time itself. You want to hold on to the past because it's the last place it existed, yet you're dragged forward unwillingly by the currents of everyday survival. Still, something surprising begins to happen in the quiet resentment. You start noticing the small ways the world is trying to carry you along with it. A neighbour waves from across the street. A co-worker saves you a better seat at lunch. Your child tugs your hand excitedly to show you something insignificant but earnest. And slowly, very slowly, you realise the world isn't moving against you, it's moving around you. You're not expected to keep pace. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But the movement reminds you that life hasn't ended, even if it has changed shape forever. And while the resentment lingers, because loss is unfair and joy is unevenly distributed, you begin to understand something gently profound. The world isn't leaving you behind. It's simply waiting for you to rejoin it when you're ready. And for now, it's enough just to keep breathing in a world that dares to keep spinning. It happens quietly. Maybe you wake up one morning and notice the sun looks a little warmer, or you make breakfast without crying. Survival doesn't announce itself, it just begins. There's no grand revelation, no triumphant music swelling in the background. No telegram this time, thank goodness. It's subtle, almost sneaky. Life tiptoes back into your world in the smallest, most unassuming ways, as if afraid you might slam the door shut again. One day, you simply stretch your legs under the covers and realize your chest doesn't feel like it's collapsing inward. The bed is still too big, yes, but it isn't hostile anymore. It's just a bed, a place to rest instead of a shrine to everything missing. You shuffle into the kitchen, flip on the stove and fry an egg without thinking about who else should be sitting across from you. You butter toast without needing to blink back tears. These mundane actions become the quiet heralds of a new phase, not healed, not whole, but functional. Functionality is underrated. People talk about moving on like it's some sweeping cinematic transformation where you suddenly become a newer, shinier version of yourself. Really, it's just making breakfast without dissolving into emotional goo. The sunlight through the window surprises you. It has the audacity to look cheerful, glittering across the sink like a friend you didn't realize you missed. You catch yourself pausing, breathing, noticing. The world hasn't changed, the faucet still drips, the wallpaper still peels, the floorboard still squeaks in its one irritating spot, but somehow you're meeting it differently. Less as an adversary, more as a companion who refuses to leave you behind. It feels strange at first, almost guilty the way joy felt guilty weeks ago. But this isn't joy, not yet. This is something milder. Something resembling permission. Permission to exist without apologizing for it. Permission to have a day that isn't tragic. Permission to let your shoulders drop half an inch. The realization doesn't come all at once. It comes in pieces. A day when you laugh, really laugh, and don't immediately feel the need to punish yourself for it. An evening when you walk past a couple holding hands and don't feel resentment tightening in your ribs. An afternoon when you catch your reflection and think, for the first time in months, I'm going to be okay, eventually. And then there are the subtle, almost invisible milestones. You donate a coat he never wore much. You repair something in the house without crying afterward. You go an entire week without opening the box of his belongings, not because you're avoiding it, but because you didn't feel compelled to torture yourself with memory that day. Your child notices it before you do. They start humming again. They bring you drawings with smiling stick figures and uneven hearts. One day, while tying their shoes, they say, "You're happier today," in that blunt, devastating way only children can. And they're right. Not happy, but happier. Something has shifted. The widow's circle notices too. They see the way you stand a little straighter during conversations, how your eyes aren't shadowed with constant dread. One gives your hand a gentle squeeze, the silent, ceremonial acknowledgement that you've crossed some invisible threshold of survivorship. But the moment that truly marks the turning point is ordinary. You sit on the porch with a cup of tea and watch the world move. Children run by, cars pass, a neighbour waves, and instead of feeling like an outsider watching life through glass, you feel present, anchored, here, still grieving, yes, still missing him fiercely. That never changes. But the grief isn't the whole sky anymore, just one star among many. You sip your tea, close your eyes, and let the warmth settle into your palms. For the first time in a long time, you allow yourself to acknowledge the quiet truth. You're still here. And being here, broken, healing, surviving, breathing, is its own kind of miracle. You start imagining a life again, not the one you wanted, but the one you have the strength to shape. And somehow, piece by piece, that becomes enough. It begins almost imperceptibly, the way all new beginnings do. You're sweeping the floor one morning, the same floor that's held your grief, your exhaustion, your long nights, when a thought slips quietly into your mind. What if there's something ahead of me? Not something glamorous or miraculous, just something. A future that doesn't feel like an obligation but a possibility. You freeze with the broom mid-air, startled by the gentleness of that idea. For so long the future felt like a hallway you would drag down against your will, stumbling forward because you didn't have the luxury of standing still. But one day, you realize your feet are moving on their own, not out of survival, but out of curiosity. The first signs are small. You start planning meals not just for tonight, but for next week. You consider painting the living room, not because it's falling apart, but because you suddenly wonder what it might look like in a softer colour. You catch yourself straightening your hair in the mirror, not for anyone else, but because you want to feel like the version of yourself who once cared about little things. Your widowhood doesn't disappear. It never will. But it loosens its grip, leaving room for something new to breathe. You begin to picture your child growing older. Imagine their life unfolding in ways that aren't defined solely by loss. You picture yourself standing beside them in those future moments, graduations, birthdays, little triumphs, not as a shadow, but as someone present, alive, participating. And somewhere deep down, though you barely dare acknowledge it, you imagine yourself in those moments too. Older, different, maybe even content. Life pushes you toward change in practical ways first. The factory offers you a better position because you've proven yourself reliable. You take it. You start saving a little. You patch the roof instead of simply pretending the stains are decor. You mend the back gate, reinforcing it until it no longer slams in the wind. Each repair feels symbolic. You're restoring more than wood and metal. You're restoring yourself. Your neighbours notice too. They stop speaking to you in hushed tones, as if you might shatter from conversational volume. Your presence becomes less tragic centerpiece, more cherished constant. People ask your advice. They compliment your strength without pity attached. They treat you like a woman with a life again, not a living monument to sorrow. Of course, there are setbacks. There are nights when you lie awake missing him so fiercely you feel winded. There are days when a memory blindsides you, and your progress dissolves into tears over a sink full of dishes. Healing isn't linear. It's more like knitting with unruly yarn, progress, unravel, progress again. But the difference now is that you trust your ability to reweave what comes undone. And then, one quietly miraculous day, you make a decision. Maybe small, maybe huge, but undeniably yours. You sign up for a class. You plant a garden. You buy a new blouse because you like the fabric. You say yes to something you would have declined months ago. It's not reinvention, it's reclamation. This isn't the future you chose. It isn't the one you dreamed of in those early years of marriage, when the world seemed bigger and kinder. But it's a future you're learning to build with steady, determined hands. Hands that have repaired pipes, soothed children, filled out endless forms, and held grief without letting it drown you. Piece by piece, the life you're shaping begins to feel less like a consolation prize and more like a testament to survival, to resilience, to love that doesn't vanish just because it changes form. And one evening, as you sit on the porch watching the sun dip behind the houses, you exhale a breath that doesn't hurt. You look toward tomorrow, not with dread, but with a quiet, breathtaking acceptance. You're still here, and you're building something worthy of that miracle. He shows up at your door in a freshly pressed uniform, holding his hat in both hands like it weighs 1,000 pounds. He talks about bravery, sacrifice, and duty, but his eyes won't meet yours. You can tell there's more he isn't saying, and suddenly you're caught between wanting the truth and being terrified of it. The sight of him knocks the breath from your lungs. His face is thinner, older in ways a man shouldn't be in his 20s. His posture is stiff, as if the weight of the uniform is suddenly too much to bear. You invite him in because that's what politeness demands, but also because your heart is hammering with 1,000 unspoken questions. He steps into your living room like someone entering a church, slow, reverent, unsure if he belongs. You offer him tea, because that's what you do when you're lost and afraid. You cling to small rituals. He accepts but doesn't drink it, simply holding the cup as if warming his hands might warm something deeper inside him. At first, the conversation is mechanical. He says the phrases he's been trained to say. Your husband was brave. He served honourably. He made us proud. Words carved into stone, polished smooth by repetition. They land in your chest with a deadened thud. You nod along, but your stomach twists. You can feel the truth circling, waiting for permission to surface. It sits behind his eyes, tight and heavy. His jaw clenches every time you mention your husband's name. And when you thank him for coming home safely, he flinches, barely, but enough. Silence settles between you like dust. You finally ask the question that's been clawing at you. Was he alone? The friend looks down at his hat, thumbs worrying the brim in nervous circles. His breath wavers. And in that moment you understand with bone-deep certainty that there is something he's been carrying like a second uniform, something heavier, something sharp-edged. He begins slowly, haltingly, as though choosing each word with tweezers. He tells you about the mission, the noise, the chaos. He describes the cold mornings, the endless marching, the way exhaustion hollowed everyone out. His voice cracks only once on the word fire. You sit perfectly still, fearing that if you move, he'll stop talking, or worse, start crying. Then he tells you what you didn't want to know but couldn't live without knowing. Your husband wasn't alone. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't calling for home in desperation. He was calling out orders, trying to pull someone else to safety. He was doing what he always did, putting others before himself. The friend swallows hard, his eyes finally rising to meet yours. They're red, wet, overwhelmed with a grief men of that era rarely allow themselves to show. It should have been me, he whispers. He pushed me out of the way. He saved my life. The words hit you harder than the telegram. Because now you're not just mourning a death. You're confronted with the brutal, beautiful truth of who your husband chose to be in his final moments. And with that truth comes a complicated tangle of emotions. Pride, sorrow, anger, gratitude, and something else that feels dangerously close to forgiveness. You want to scream at the universe for its cruelty. You want to hug this man for bringing a piece of your husband back home. You want to ask him every question and no questions at all. Instead, you reach out and place your hand over his, a small gesture, but he reacts as though you've lifted a mountain off his shoulders. His body shakes with relief or guilt, or perhaps both. You realize he's been terrified of this moment too. You tell him softly, because softness is all your heart can manage, that it wasn't his fault, that heroism doesn't recognize fairness, that carrying the memory forward is its own kind of duty. When he leaves, walking down the path with shoulders bowed, you watch from the doorway. You see the grief etched in his gait and realize something quietly devastating. He's another casualty of this war, not in body but in spirit. And as the door closes, you exhale a long, trembling breath, understanding that some truths don't destroy you, they reshape you, painfully, slowly, but honestly. For months you've imagined you hear him coming home, the crunch of boots on gravel, the jingle of his keys. But one quiet afternoon you realise you haven't turned toward the door all day. It's not relief, and it's not forgetting. It's something quieter, like the heart finally exhaling. It happens without fanfare, without bells, without that dramatic music Hollywood always promises. You're just sitting at the table, peeling potatoes or mending a loose button or coaxing your child through arithmetic, when it dawns on you, the absence of expectation. The silence in the house feels neutral instead of suspenseful. You haven't flinched at the sound of passing footsteps. You haven't mistaken a car down the street for something miraculous. You haven't paused mid-task thinking, "Is that him?" For so long, your nervous system acted like its own early warning system, always alert, always listening for an impossible return. Every creak of the floorboards made your pulse leap. Every shadow in the window twisted your breath. Hope and sorrow did a long, exhausting dance inside your ribcage. But today the air is still. You hold the moment gently, like a fragile ornament. You're afraid to breathe too deeply, worried the realization will shatter. Because the truth is complicated. You never wanted to stop expecting him. That tiny spark, irrational, stubborn, unkillable, had been your last tether to the impossible. It gave you something to imagine in the quiet hours, even if imagining hurt. You stand up slowly and walk toward the front door anyway, compelled by habit. The porch is empty, the gravel undisturbed, no boots, no silhouette. The space looks exactly the same as it has every day since the telegram arrived, but something in you is different. This time, you don't feel the jolt of disappointment. You don't feel the ache of anticipation dissolving. You just look. And then you close the door softly without tears. It isn't erasure. It isn't betrayal. It's a quiet shift, the way snow melts into the ground or how dawn arrives unnoticed until the sky is already light. For months you lived suspended between presence and absence, a widow still listening for a husband. That tension exhausted you in ways you never admitted. Your shoulders carried it. Your sleep fractured under it. Your breath hesitated because hope wrapped itself like thorns around every inhale. But now, standing in your hallway with sunlight stretching across the floorboards, you sense something else blooming. Acceptance. Not the loud, celebratory kind people expect you to reach like a finish line, but the gentler version, the kind that whispers, "You can stop holding vigil now." You go back to your chores, and you realize your movements aren't sharp anymore. You aren't listening quite so hard. You aren't bracing for a miracle. Later, when you sweep the porch, you pause again. You look at the path he used to walk, boots crunching gravel, hands stuffing his hat into his coat pocket, smile ready to flash at you like a sunrise. The memory doesn't stab this time. It rests beside you, soft and warm, like a friend sitting with you on the steps. You sit for a while, letting the breeze move around you. It lifts your hair, nudges the hem of your skirt, brushes your face with a kind of gentleness grief never offered. For the first time, you notice how peaceful the afternoon is. Birds are chirping. Children are laughing somewhere down the block. Life is still happening, not as an insult, but as a steady invitation. Your heart unclenches a little more. You don't announce this moment to anyone. You don't write it down or commemorate it. But you tuck it somewhere quiet inside you. The understanding that healing isn't a single step forward. It's a shift in direction, a loosening, a softening. You haven't stopped loving him. You haven't forgotten his voice, his laugh, the sound he made when he dropped his keys, because he always tried to juggle too many things at once. But you're no longer waiting for those sounds to return. You rise from the porch, brush dirt from your hands, and step back into the house. Not because you've moved on, but because you've moved with the loss into a new kind of living. And somewhere deep inside, your heart finally exhales. You never used to go often, but now it's part of your weekly routine. Not because you expect a letter, those days are gone, because checking the box, running your fingers over empty space and walking home again gives structure to something formless. Grief needs routines, even tiny ones. The post office used to be nothing more than a building you passed on your way to somewhere else. A place that smelled faintly of ink, dust, and whatever candies the clerk kept in a jar by the register. But now it's become a kind of emotional checkpoint. Once a week, usually on a Tuesday, you put on your coat, straighten your collar, and walk there with the solemnity of a pilgrimage. The steps up to the post office feel familiar under your shoes. You notice the creak in the third one, the way the door always sticks before it gives way, the dim bell that chimes overhead as you step inside. The clerks smile at you politely, their expressions kind but tinged with the knowledge of what brings you there. They've seen this ritual before, hundreds of women performing the same quiet dance of obligation and ache. You nod back, avoiding prolonged eye contact because compassion is sometimes harder to bear than pity. You walk to your box, the small metal rectangle with a lock that feels both too flimsy and too final. Your fingers hover over the cool brass key before sliding it in. The click echoes louder than it should in your chest. Every time you hold your breath, not from hope, but from habit. Hope left months ago, but your body hasn't gotten the memo. You open the little door, empty, always empty. You stare at the blank interior for a moment, tracing the edges with your eyes, letting the stillness settle around you. There's nothing inside, but somehow the emptiness feels like confirmation. Proof that time is moving forward, even if your heart is still learning how. Sometimes you touch the back wall of the box, cool and smooth. It's not about expecting anything. It's about acknowledging absence in a controlled way. A way that doesn't ambush you in the middle of the grocery store or halfway through folding laundry. You close the door softly. The sound is small, but it marks the end of another ritual cycle. Outside, you take a deep breath as the air fills your lungs, crisp and slightly metallic. You start your walk home, the same path every time, because consistency feels like a lifeline. You pass Mrs. McAllister's porch with its always dying plants, the corner store with its chipped sign, the young couple strolling hand in hand, a scene that still twinges but not sharply. The walk gives your mind space to wander, not into grief's most treacherous corners. You've learned to avoid those on weekdays, but into gentler reflections. You think about the way routines shape us, how widows throughout time have created their own rituals to survive the shapelessness of loss. Some light candles, some visit graveyards, you visit an empty metal box. By the time you reach your street, something inside you has settled, not healed, but softened. You unlock your door, step inside, and set your keys in the bowl by the entryway with a familiar clink. Another small ritual, another stitch in the fabric of surviving. Your child calls from the other room, asking what's for dinner. You answer automatically, your voice steady. The day flows on, chores, dishes, bedtime stories, ordinary tasks anchoring you to the world. Later, as you lie in bed, you think about your visit. Not with sorrow, but with quiet understanding. These routines don't exist to bring back what was lost. They exist to help you live with what remains. And strangely, beautifully, the emptiness of that post office box becomes less of a wound and more of a space where grief can breathe without overwhelming you, a space that holds the things you can't say out loud. Grief needs rituals, and even the smallest ritual, a walk, a key, a glance into nothing, can give shape to a life learning how to continue. So tonight, as you ease deeper into your blankets and let the noise of the day melt away, take a slow breath and sit with what you've just travelled through. The life of a 1940s war widow wasn't dramatic in the Hollywood sense. There were no soaring orchestral swells, no glamorous slow-motion moments, just the quiet, stubborn resilience of someone who kept going, even when the world asked far too much of her. She woke up every morning to a house that felt too big, too quiet, too cold, and she filled it anyway, with work and routine and tired laughter, that only sometimes reached her eyes. She navigated ration books, factory shifts, empty chairs at the table, and the echo of footsteps that would never return. And somehow, through all of that, she managed to hold her life together with nothing but determination, humour, and the hope that tomorrow might hurt a little less than today. These women didn't see themselves as heroic, but they were. They were living proof that the human heart can be cracked open and still keep beating. They carried grief in one hand and grocery bags in the other. They raised children, signed forms, learned new skills, and stitched their lives back together in ways big and small. So as you lie in your warm bed with soft sheets, hot water, and the luxury of sleeping without fear of telegrams arriving at dawn, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the women who walk this path before you. The ones who endured the unimaginable with grit, grace, and a dark sense of humour that probably kept them sane. History may be messy and heartbreaking, but it's also a reminder that people are impossibly strong, impossibly hopeful, and wonderfully ridiculous. Sleep well, my friend. You've earned it.